Should you hire a tax attorney that's based in your city, or does it matter? Someone local just quoted you $15,000 and someone out of state quoted you $10,000 for the same work. Are you paying a premium for local representation or getting a discount for taking some risk? I'm Andrew Bosserman, tax attorney and former IRS agent with Boss Tax Law. And today I'm going to tell you when geography matters when dealing with IRS and state tax disputes. So my firm, Boss Tax Law, we're based in Charlotte, North Carolina, but I represent clients all over the country: New York, California, Arizona, North and South Carolina, Florida, you name it. I can practice there when dealing with IRS issues. And even internationally, if someone based abroad has a U.S. tax issue, I can help them. Sometimes I get questions regarding, should I hire someone local in my city? And the short answer is, for most IRS matters, geography is completely irrelevant. So let's break down exactly how things with the IRS work and when geography matters. So let's start with common occurrence, IRS audits. IRS audits are normally assigned to a local office near you, especially for field audits where an IRS agent would typically come out to your place of business or to your representative's office. While they generally like to meet in person, those can be handled fully virtually or sometimes via correspondence. So for example, I was recently working on an audit and we exchanged documents virtually. I uploaded documents using a secure IRS system, and we had the entire interview done via Microsoft Teams. There really isn't much of an advantage anymore to having a local attorney. What you really want to find is an attorney that meshes with your skills, because IRS audits can be handled completely virtually. When you're dealing with IRS appeals, similar situation to IRS audits, appeals is virtualized. Your appeal gets sent to a centralized area and then assigned generally to a local office, although that's not always the case. But with an appeal, you do have a right to meet in person if you want, although many appeals meetings are now handled either virtually or just via telephone. So, for example, I had a taxpayer once based in New York that had an appeal that was handled by the Los Angeles office, and I was in Charlotte, North Carolina, and we just had a phone call. Sometimes it can be beneficial to meet in person if you have a high stakes or unique case, but many times with appeals, you'll meet virtually and geography doesn't matter for that. When you have a penalty abatement request, these are handled entirely by correspondence. You write in or file Form 843, and then the IRS decides. It's only when it gets to the appeals stage that you potentially have the right to meet with an appeals officer. But up until that point, it's handled entirely by correspondence. Same with offers in compromise, installment agreements, or other collection issues. If a revenue officer hasn't been assigned, you're just dealing with automated collection systems at the IRS, which is just a centralized phone number and group of individuals that you call. So no benefit to being local. And even when a revenue officer has been assigned, although local revenue officers are normally assigned, oftentimes meetings are just held via phone. So no real advantage to being local. So for almost all IRS tax controversy work, geography is pretty much irrelevant. And also when it comes to tax court, when you file a tax court petition, you actually have to choose what court you want your case to be heard. It's going to be heard in tax court, but the judges travel to you. You don't specifically go to tax court. They hold tax court in different federal buildings across the country. Now, it may be beneficial to go to one close to you if you think the case is going to trial, but if not, sometimes it's beneficial to choose trial near where your attorney is. So it could be in a different state where you're located. And also 99% of tax court cases don't go to trial. So oftentimes it's likely best to choose a city near where your attorney is based, because they probably have some rapport already with the IRS attorneys. For example, I see the same IRS attorneys dealing with all the tax court cases I deal with. And also, tax court trials can be held completely remote as well via Zoom. Again, geography doesn't really matter when it comes to tax court litigation. When tax issues, when a local attorney is important, criminal tax cases, those are generally local to you, and you're going to be charged in the federal district wherever you're charged. You're going to want to find a local attorney because there's a lot more in-person interactions in a criminal tax case. Same with state tax issues. You may not be dealing necessarily in person with the state departments of revenue. You want a attorney that's in the states where you have the state tax issues. So for example, if you have a North Carolina tax issue, you want to reach out to an attorney in North Carolina or that's licensed in North Carolina, because state tax issues do vary and you want someone who's familiar with the jurisdiction. But really, ever since COVID, most professional services have gone virtual and tax law isn't really an exception. Before 2020, maybe you always wanted to meet your attorney in person, visit their office, have face-to-face meetings. But since then, COVID forced everyone to adapt. Now I rarely meet with clients in person. I'm happy to when it makes sense and they live in the area. But even with people who live in Charlotte, sometimes very close by to me, not that far away in the city, we oftentimes just meet via Teams or phone call and can handle everything that way. So really the question you should be asking is not whether your attorney is local. The most important thing is whether your attorney is accessible, responsive, competent, and will give you the best possible representation. And if you're in a major metro area, think New York City, Los Angeles, other big cities, you might actually be paying a premium for local legal work, since oftentimes attorneys based in big cities cost a lot more, especially if they're at large firms. Don't just assume that necessarily local equals better or a bigger firm equals better. Sometimes it might be more expensive just because you're paying for overhead and a premium address. So if geography or the location doesn't exactly matter, what should you focus on when you're choosing a tax attorney? One thing you want to focus on is tax controversy experience and specialization. So you'd be better off hiring an attorney out of state, but that only focuses on tax controversy work like I do. Also, you want to look at their credentials and court admissions. What kind of tax work have they done? For example, I'm a tax attorney, but I also used to work at the IRS and I have my CPA. And I'm also admitted to all 3 federal courts that hear tax cases. Also, you want to factor in accessibility and communication. How quickly do they respond? How do they prefer to communicate? Do they return your calls and emails promptly, or is it hard to get a hold of them? An out-of-state attorney who responds quickly is going to be much better than someone right down the street who takes forever to get back to you. Also, think about your fit and comfort level. An attorney-client relationship is important, and you have to make sure that you can work well with the individual, because oftentimes these tax cases can take a good amount of time to resolve, a year or more in a lot of cases. So make sure that you're comfortable with your tax attorney and trust them, because you're going to likely be dealing with them for a good amount of time. And finally, you should think about fee structures and value. How are they structuring fees? There's different ways. There's hourly, there's flat fee, there's contingency, there's hybrid. And also, what kind of value are they providing? How much are you getting for the fees? What's included in the scope of work? That's much more important than geographical location. So essentially, here's the bottom line on whether you need a local tax attorney. For almost all IRS tax controversy work, you do not need to use a local attorney, and it's completely irrelevant. It won't give you an advantage. But if you're dealing with certain more localized issues, say criminal prosecutions, state and local tax work, you likely want an attorney who's local or familiar with the state or jurisdiction you're dealing with. But ultimately, you want the most competent, experienced attorney, accessible, fit level, the whole package you can find regardless of where they're located when dealing with an IRS problem. So don't necessarily pay a premium for a local service or trust the person down the street more than someone in a different state. Tax law, when dealing with the IRS, is a national practice. Tax court is federal. The work is done electronically most of the time. hiring a local attorney is not necessary. So I represent clients all over the United States and even internationally from my home base in Charlotte, North Carolina. My clients get the same quality representation whether they're located just a few minutes down the street from me or across the country. So if you're dealing with an IRS issue and want experienced representation, please reach out. Visit my website, bosstaxlaw.com. There you can reach out, schedule a consultation, and I'd be happy to discuss your case and tell you whether or not it makes sense to work with me or someone in your geographic location. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.